The Full Melt Show is intended for a mature audience. It contains adult themes, adult content, and sometimes adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
It's the Full Melt Show.
Are you high? What are you talking about?
It's the Full Melt.
The Full Melt Show. A marijuana discussion about news, culture, politics, and lifestyle. FullMelt.com. Toll free. 844-420-TALK. 844-420-TALK.
Ah, yes. The program has begun. Welcome to Hump Day. There will be no humping going on here today. Just warning you. Always seems like the news never stops in the cannabis arena. Yesterday, heavy on the subject of Michigan Governor Rick Snyder. All hot and heavy in the press with his lack of attention to the Flint water supply and, I don't know, actually causing its poisoning. Let's see, I'm the mayor. No, I'm not. I'm the governor. Okay, I wish I was the president. I'm not the president. I wish I was the president. No, I'm the governor of the state of Michigan. And as the governor, I don't like the way Flint's finances have gone, and so I've appointed an emergency manager. Yep, I'm kicking out your elected legislature and mayor, your elected city council and mayor, getting rid of them, replacing them with an appointee from the state government. And the state government appointee says, look, we need to save some money here, and we're going to do that by switching the water supply. And I'm incompetent, so I'm not going to do anything about treating that water supply source before I put it into our treatment system and then put it through the pipelines that are, the city water lines are somewhere about 100 years old in many places, just like it is in many places around the country. And so the water's going to leach lead into the drinking supply because it's corrosive. And I'm going to poison all you. All your kids, they're going to have long-term detrimental effects from lead in the water. How many kids are there in Flint? I'd like to know that. I wonder if I can Google that statistic, that population right now. And in the long run, everybody deserves water, don't they? I mean, don't we all here in this country, at least in this country, have access to safe, clean water? I mean, we're up there with third world countries if you don't have access to clean, safe water. It's one of the foundations of civilization. I'm just going to Google it. Let's see. How many kids in Flint, Michigan? Dup. See, it's all these stories about the water supply, but nobody telling us about the actual number of kids. I wonder if there's got to be some census statistic as to how many children in schools. Try the school, see if we can get something out of schools. Because I'm just curious now. I've tickled my own curiosity. So according to Wikipedia, I'm just using Wikipedia stats if it's in here. History. See, they're not going to tell me how many kids. Oh, that sucks. Flint schools, Michigan rating, public and private. Wow. Just not getting any stats on. If you know how many kids there are in Flint, Michigan, I'd like to know. 844-420-TALK. It's not giving me. It's giving me all the schools' names and all this kind of stuff, but it's not giving me like a head count. I'm sure if I dicked around with it long enough on the internet, I'd find that number. Maybe I will during the next break. I don't know. But how many of those kids depend upon tap water? especially when you change it without warning and you don't tell anybody that you're not doing it right because you don't know what you're doing. And, oh, by the way, we've replaced your mayor and your city council. Yeah, because they couldn't handle the money right, so we had to do it for them. And so they no longer represent you. Well, they do represent you, but they're not actively doing it anymore because we're doing it instead. And we're not listening to you because we're listening to Lansing. That's who's paying us. I did that whole story yesterday, and we did it all hour. There was so much to talk about, so many facets to that angle. And I found if you happen to pop into Facebook and look at the Facebook profile, I changed my profile page. It's actually a picture, and if you know anything, well, you don't. So, the governor here, he is an Ann Arbor resident when he's not hanging out at the governor's mansion in Lansing. And you know where Ann Arbor is, right? Oh yeah, U of M. That's right. You know where the governor was while they were having this water crisis? There was actually meetings happening, talking to community about what's going on with the water crisis. Big turning point. You'd think that the governor would want to be down there in that limelight and trying to take ownership of it and actually directing people about what's going on, how they're responding to this disaster. Who's being accounted for in its creation. Oh, yeah, that's right. It started with the governor, didn't it? Oh, yeah, it all falls at his feet. He happened to be at a U of M basketball game, hanging out with front row seats, courtside seats right there at U of M, sitting next to the coach. Couple of notable bigwigs next to him. And the reason I mentioned the Facebook page, my Facebook page, my profile image now, it's my favorite picture of all time now. It's my favorite picture that I've ever, well, not ever, but it's right now. It's my current favorite picture, and it's going to take a while to knock it out of that ranking. Go if you know how to find me on Facebook, look at my Facebook profile page, and I'll look at the profile picture. There's a picture of the governor, Governor Snyder, at this meeting, and deservedly so. I wish I'd seen it on I wished I'd watched it. There's either a player or some other person on the court. It has to be a player, right? He's in the gold shorts. You can't see him because he's facing away from you in the shot. But he's on his side at the governor's feet, obviously involved in some play. And he's got his boot up against. It's really a sneaker, high top sneaker. I wish it was a jack boot, but it's just a high top sneaker, and it's up right there at his jawline. And the governor's got his eyes closed, and he's wincing, and it looks like he's trying to hold hands with the guy. His wife, who I'm sure is just as terrified because the governor looks, looks like he's getting bullied in the school hallway is what it looks like. But his wife. Is he married? It's his wife. His wife is sitting right next to him, and she looks like she's laughing her ass off, but she's not. She's also afraid. And the guy sitting next to her, way on the other side, he's also got some pose of wince. It's a winced pose. I've never seen a shot of a sitting governor or a sitting president or anything like that where there's an image of a boot right up in his cheek. And I don't think he got injured. I don't think he actually got kicked, or if he did, it was not very hard. But if you ever want to see what it looks like when the governor gets kicked in the face, oh, you so deserve it, you jack piece of crap. I don't like our governor here. Can you tell? Tell us how you really feel, Steve. Do you like the governor? Would you like to go hang out at his house, maybe mow his lawn? Hand him the umbrellas for his little drinks. He had to be completely drunk when he decided to screw with that water supply or come up with this crazy alteration of this emergency manager law. Only one like it in the whole country. So I guess I'm done with him. I'm just done. I can't take it anymore. Honestly, I can't. Just as a quick note, and then we'll talk about some program notes and some other news in the show. There's a a couple of things. So we'll do some community calendar type stuff. I found a great reference point for at least locally here, and sometimes not locally. I get invited to a lot of events, whether they're local or not. And these are always usually cannabis-related events. And so I'm going to start passing some of this information on along during the show when it's available and when it's appropriate. But one of the news stories that I saw, and this is a local story, but it's always a national story. It happens all the time in places where they've allowed for the use of medical marijuana or retail cannabis. You see this story happening routinely. I see this at least once a month. It used to happen with a little more frequency, but then it toned back down, and then it started peaking back up again, where more and more of these stories, it happens to be with these people that can't figure out that you shouldn't mess or trifle with technical things that have dangerous properties. Unless and until you know what those properties are and how to handle them safely. And I'm talking about explosions in houses from people what they call open blasting cannabis, usually trim. If I ever do it, it's with flour. I try to do it with flour. I'll use the trim for it, but I won't just use trim. I'll use trim and flour. To make cannabis oil. It's an extract. It's how you make what they call wax or shatter. There's a whole lot of different names for it. Depends on how you do it and the methodology. There's butter. And I'm not talking about can of butter that you cook with, although you could do that with this. I'm not talking about putting a bunch of butter in a pan and then putting some pot in there and stirring it and then straining it and then using the butter after straining out the now extracted marijuana. I'm not talking about that kind of butter. And I don't agree with the use of that kind of butter, by the way. Anytime this is something I learned when I was trained professionally in the kitchen. And that's it. You'd never, ever want to mix organic material in with a fat product. But it's butter fat. I mean, it's the fat. It's what it is. It's butter fat. You don't mix butter fat in with organic material because the organic material is going to break down and spoil. It's going to rot. It's going to cause that butter to only be usable maybe a week or possibly 2 weeks tops in the fridge. House explosions. We'll talk about that as our first story coming back after the break here on the Full Melt Show. Don't go away.
You're getting the Full Melt.
When you need legal help, you don't want to guess at who's standing next to you in court. And when it comes to a medical marijuana defense, it's even smarter to partner with a lawyer before you need one. Based in Royal Oak, David Rudoy has a proven history of not being afraid to take your case all the way to the Supreme Court and win. Find the law offices of Rudoy Law
at RudoyLaw.com.
RudoyLaw.com is a quick reference on your rights concerning Michigan medical marijuana
and up-to-date news.
That's RUDOI Law.com. Call 248-935-9074 now and talk about your legal needs, because at RudoyLaw.com, we don't just stand up for you, we stand up with you.
What's up with these things, Victor?
We decided to give ourselves stickers for each feature we release.
We read about 10,000 suggestions a week to create features that, as traders, we'd want to use.
10,000 suggestions? Who reads all of those?
He does.
For all the confidence you need, TD Ameritrade. You got this.
Hey, it's Steve Green for the Sweet Leaf in Flint, because now getting safe access to medical cannabis patients in Flint, Michigan is never more welcoming. Presenting the Sweet Leaf, a brand new patient experience bringing 12 carefully selected caregivers housed in 9 separate offices to distinctly assist you with their knowledge and reputation for excellent patient care. Classes and training coming soon in the large community room. Check it out in person, 400 South Door Highway, or call 810-259-2571. The Sweet Leaf Center in Flint, 810-259-2571.
Got something to hide? Canalock offers discreet and effective storage solutions that destroy odor, so nobody knows. Canalock is a patented charcoal-activated bag that discreetly stores your marijuana. Canalock is made from the same material as military chemical warfare suits. Get yours at Canalock.com. Visit Canalock.com to learn more about no-smell technology.
Introducing Sacred Elements, a place for natural and alternative healing for the mind, body, and soul. Sacred Elements. It's one place, all solutions.
Registered, licensed, certified, ordained.
Sacred Elements.
Massage, hypnosis, Reiki,
Sacred Elements.
raindrop, aroma and color therapy, body detox, ministry, life coaching, weight and nutrition counseling.
Sacred Elements. Next to the Sweet Leaf, 400 South Dort Highway, Flint.
11 to 7 daily, closed Sunday.
Call 810-259-2570. It's the Full Melt Radio Show.
Okay, here we go. That's right. You know, if you're one of these guys, marijuana's new to you in at least a legal way or a medical way in your state, or maybe you're leaning in that direction. Your state's trying to go in that direction. I know you've heard about the wax by now. I know you have. You know, when Michigan's medical marijuana program first came on board back in early 2009, the first time I was exposed to actual hash oil is what they call it. It was originally deemed as hash oil. Now, the term is really deceiving because in its raw form, hash oil is not really like an oil at all. It's thick. It's too thick to be called an oil, although that's really what it is. Because if you heated it a little bit, it would liquefy very quickly, and it would be very liquid. So it is an oil, but it's just a solid oil. So, you know, if you ever had, like, a lot of people in the cannabis community can relate to this, organic coconut oil, or just coconut oil in general. If you take coconut oil in its raw form, just by itself, unprocessed in a tub or container, it's usually white. It looks like paraffin. It looks like wax. Like an uncolored candle. That's what it looks like. It's not quite as thick as that. It's more got the consistency of like a hard, like shortening. You can press your finger into it, and it'll push aside in lumps. It'll just... It's kind of hard to describe, but it's very thick when it's cold. When it's not cold, but just like room temperature, like 70 degrees or less, it's a solid. But if you heat it up a little bit, it turns liquid very quick. That's kind of how cannabis oil is. It is how cannabis oil is, or what they call hash oil. It's really just an extract of the marijuana plant and the oil that comes off of it when it's, set at room temperature, because I could describe the whole process to you. I'll spare you that detail. I'm sure you can look up how to make, BHO or butane hash oil on the internet. It's not that difficult. Then you'll find 100 videos, 1,000 videos of people making it. Back in 2006, the first time I was exposed to true hash oil, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, what is that?" "Oh, that's your hash oil." "Oh, really? Why does this one look different than that one? What's the difference here?" "Oh, well, this is regular hash oil. This is what they call shatter. And then what's this other stuff? It looks powdery." "Well, that's also shatter. But it's just, it's in a powder form, like." "Really? How did they get that, I wonder?" "Wait a minute, what is this? This almost looks like it's solid, but it's in little chunks, and they'll rattle around in the container if you shake them." I don't know what's the best way I could describe it. It's soft, but it's kind of hard. If you picked it up and squeezed it, it would press flat, and some of it might crumble away. It looks very crumbly. Looks like cookie crumbles, I suppose. Like if you opened up the box of Oreos, not the Oreos because that's dark. If you opened up a box of Chips Ahoy and looked in the bottom of the box of the Chips Ahoy, you'd find these little crumbly pieces of cookie. And there's another form that looks like that. And these are all made in different ways. It's all the same extract. It's just processed differently. Now, I got to try this. So I at the time, at the place that I was at, they allowed you to for a small fee, I think it was like $4 at the time, you can do what they call a dab. Do a dab. It's called a dab. Why do they call it a dab? Well, because a little dab will do you. And you can stick to that. I mean, especially a first-timer if you've never done a dab before. It is concentrated cannabis. I mean, it's like in the 80% THC range. It's and it doesn't have all the cannabis components in it. It doesn't have all the terpenes. It doesn't have all the cannabinoid profile of the plant. It has mostly CBD and THC, mostly THC. If there's any THC or any CBD, it's usually in a smaller amount. Depends really on the origin of the plant, the type of the plant, type of material you used in the first place. But when I was first exposed to it, I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you do it, you better be prepared. You probably should be sitting down. There are a lot. I've seen it a lot of times where people have done hash oil for the first time, and it'll drop you. I mean, it's not a permanent drop, and it doesn't last like that forever. But it will put you out really quick. Like it'll black you out. It won't make you. It won't make you unconscious. It'll just for a second it will. It'll black you out, so everything goes dark. You don't know where you're at. You kind of go down on one knee if you're standing. And all of a sudden, you don't know where you're at. You don't know what's going on. You start to come back around out of it a few seconds later. And you're like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I'm not naked. That's a good thing. Where am I? Something happened. Where am I? Oh, wait a minute. I'm down on one knee. That's right. I'm in the dispensary, and I just did a big wax hit. Wow. That was wow. And then all the vision comes back, and you stand back up, and everybody's laughing at you. Oh. There goes another virgin. Now, I'm not saying that won't be the only time that happens. If you don't do dabs real often, it'll make it happen again. And if you do dabs, you're going to develop a higher THC tolerance. So you may not want to switch back to regular cannabis again, which might actually be a good thing because, if you're doing the dab, at least you're doing it absent all that plant material. All the carcinogens that would be in the burning of any plant material. Because there's no plant material in it. It's all oil. It's all the extract of the plant. It's the active ingredient or ingredients or some of them. So the first time I was exposed to this hash oil or wax, the only place that I saw it or had access to it in that form ever at that point was at this dispensary. And obviously, there were a lot of people that were getting into that market. There were a lot of people that were making hash oil. And this was, like I said, just a few months into the medical marijuana program here in Michigan. It wasn't more than 6 months tops into that program. So maybe by the fall of 2009 that I had been exposed. Now, I've heard about hash oil before, and people have shown me what they called hash oil before. And I always ask you, how did you get your hash oil? How did you make the hash oil? And they would tell you some grand, strange process by which they boiled some roots or took some resin out of a bong and they did this thing and they made this stuff. So the first time I ever saw what somebody called hash oil, I'm like, what do you do with it? Oh, you dip a paper in it and then roll a doobie with it that way. Like, I don't get it. But then when I finally saw what was real hash oil, because the stuff that I saw was very liquidy. It was like somebody had almost melted down some cannabis in some other oil, like a vegetable oil or something, or like a coconut oil, which is another form of vegetable oil. So it's a popular substance, but I'll tell you back then, the only people that knew about it or had access to it were people around the medical community. The regular people on the street had never heard or seen of this before because if you showed it to them, they'd look like you had three heads. And then if you actually did something, they'd think, oh, God, I'm not going to do that because there's a little apparatus involved in its consumption, at least, on first introduction. And there's still some apparatus involved even today. It's just a lot more decorative and, I don't know, less looks like you're smoking crack. So you got to heat the cannabis oil up really hot, and it's going to vaporize. It's going to turn into this oily smoke. And it's on the inhalation of that oily smoke, and it completely vaporizes, by the way. If you put a dab on a hot implement, what they call a nail in a bong, it's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, if you use a pipe, you can use a special pipe, but it's just got, in a normal pipe on the bottom, there's some holes, right? It's where the smoke goes through. It's a way to keep the ash and the smoking product in its place, and then you can retrieve the smoke through those holes by sucking through the pipe. Well, then usually there's a screen in the bottom if there's not holes. Now, with wax, it's a dish, it's a bowl. It's just there's no holes in the bottom. There's no screen. It's just like a cup of glass where the bowl would be, and then you could put your wax in there. Quite a bit. You could put a lot in there if you wanted. It's really not necessary, but you could, and a lot of people did. And then you'd take a glass poker, just a glass rod, and you'd heat it with a torch. Heat the end of it with a torch so that it gets so it's glowing, so it's red hot. And then you dab it. You dab, dab, dab. You just tap it in there. And every time you tap it, it's going to make smoke, right? I don't know why I feel like it's for me. I feel like I'm in kindergarten for pot smokers. Pot smoking 101. But you got to understand, a lot of people tuning into this program may have nothing to do with marijuana. They may have never heard about it before. So I'm just kind of spelling it along for the people so they don't get lost in the shop talk, what we call shop talk. So you do the little dabs, and there's a hole at the top of the pipe. Now, there's two holes at the top of the pipe. One is like a shotgun. It's a way that you can pull your thumb off that hole and clear the pipe of the remaining smoke so it doesn't sit in there and stick to the sides and gum up your pipe. There's a shotgun hole, but there's also a hole at the top of the rim. So the shotgun's usually on the side, somewhere, or in the back of the bowl. The little hole on a wax bowl is at the top. And when the smoke gets generated by tapping that hot dabber straw in there, that hot little, it's not a straw, it's a solid glass rod usually. You could use metal, but the metal transfers heat very quickly. So if you use glass, the heat won't travel up to your fingers. It'll cool off before it ever reaches your fingers. It doesn't migrate up glass very quickly. If you do that with metal, it's gonna burn your hand before you can tap it. So you tap it in there, and the smoke gets generated, and you suck it down through that little hole. It's just that simple. Now, you don't want to put it in there and hold it in there because that oil's gonna quench the heat on that glass, and you're not gonna hardly get any smoke. And then you're gonna pull the dabber out of there, that glass rod, and it's gonna be stuck to the end of it because it's not supposed to be that way. You're supposed to heat it, tap, 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 and every time you tap, it makes smoke, and then you suck the smoke through the hole. But see, there's apparatus involved. There's the torch. There's almost always a torch. And if there's not a torch, you got to plug something in and use a lot of electricity to get the nail hot. There's another method if you use a nail. There's two methods of using the nail. It's called a nail because I'm sure they started out with something that was a nail. After a while, they started figuring out the properties and how to make it last long, and then they come up with these. I don't know. They're tooled pieces of metal, usually titanium. Sometimes is involved. Sometimes people use quartz if they're using glass instead. But this is just a piece of metal that would go down inside of what is considered like a bong. And so when you get that hot with a torch, and that's how we started out with a torch, you get that. This is a substitute method of the method I just described using a bowl. Because that was the first way I did it personally, was with this dab bowl. But then came along the nail, and so you'd buy these titanium nails for like $40 or $50, and because they're expensive. Titanium's expensive. There's a reason you use titanium. We won't get into all that. But you put it down in there. It fits into the bowl perfectly, and then you get it hot with a torch, so it's glowing red. And then you take like a little poker, like a little, I suppose, if for lack of a better term, you had a wire hanger, and you just clipped a bit of it off. You had just a piece of wire, and you got a little bit of the hard substance, the wax or the butter or the shatter or whatever the oil is. You get it on the end there, maybe a rice grain size bit, like a fat rice grain. That's all you'll need, especially if you're doing it first. You might not even need that much first. If you tap it on, if you put it on there, hold it, just roll it around, just kind of rub it around until all of that oil is off, and start sucking on that pipe at the same time, all that smoke's going to go down through the pipe hole, and the wax will be gone, and then you can set the pipe down, somewhere where it's stable and it's not going to fall over because there's that hot thing in there, right? And you got to be careful because that thing, I've seen people where that thing has fallen out while they were using it. fall out on their lap. Yeah, that thing is hot. Gotta be careful. I've seen a bunch of people do that before. The hot part comes out. Either they set it down or it tipped over or something happened, and the hot part flips out and it's now melting a hole in the carpet. I mean, this is why people would look at you like you had 3 heads when you first started doing this. But I'll tell you what, it wasn't. You know, if you tried to get somebody to use the wax, hey, try the wax, and they'd never done it before, they'd tell you, look, I'm not doing that. No, that's okay. I'm good. Let me hit that doobie, though. Hey, let me hit that bowl. They would do that all day long. But street people would be like, no, I don't know what that is, and I'm not going to try it. Okay, well, that's good. At least more for me. So, but then it wasn't, I swear to God, it wasn't another maybe year later. And the people on the street were no longer using cannabis flower, at least not in the quantities that they used to use it before, because now they're all about the dabs. They're all about the dabs now. And it's like, wow. So you're not a medical patient, and somehow through medicine, through the medical system, you found these dabs. Somebody's giving them to you somewhere. And now that's all like, hey, I want to get some dabs. You got any dabs? You're like, look, I thought you didn't do the dabs. Oh, I do now. So I mean, there are actually people. There's, you know, if you tried to go out in the street and ask for cannabis wax or oil, nobody would have any. No, nobody would have any. It's everywhere now here in Michigan. Just on the illegal street market, just on the black market, you can go find people that sell pot that also have wax, and they're not in the medical system. They're just everyday street dealers. Weren't trying to get in the medical system. Wanted no part of it. But I got some weed for sale, and hey, look here, I got this new thing called wax. It took about a year, a little over a year from that time, and everybody knew about it. They had seen it. They had been around it. They may have even done it. But what does this mean? It means that the production is going to go higher. People are going to start producing it. And that's when you get into the volatile situation, because the way this is made is with chemicals, and usually volatile chemicals. And it's not plural. It's usually just one. It's usually the most popular chemical for making hash oil is butane, because it's widely available. We'll talk a little bit more about this, and then cannabis news coming up after the break. Don't go away.
You're getting the full melt.
What's up with these things, Victor?
We decided to give ourselves stickers for each feature we release.
We read about 10,000 suggestions a week to create features that, as traders, we'd want to use.
10,000 suggestions? Who reads all of those?
He does.
For all the confidence you need, TD Ameritrade. You got this.
At book club, they were asking me what you're doing now, Janice.
Blogging. Your blog is just pictures of you in a mirror.
It's called a fashion blog, Todd. Well, I've been helping people save money with Progressive's discounts. Flo, can you get Janice a job?
You should have stuck to softball. I was so much better at softball than Janice dead.
Where's your wife, Todd?
Vacation.
Discounts like homeowners, multi-policy. I got a discount on this ham.
I've got the meat sweats. It's good ham, Diane.
Paperless discounts. Give it a rest, Flo.
Yeah, Flo, give it a rest.
We ask people to tell us something that happened in their past and something that might happen in their future. The good things were put on yellow magnets and the bad ones on blue. The results show the past was a pretty even mix of good and bad, yet the future was almost all good things. Now that you've seen the results of this experiment, what does it mean to you?
We all want to think about positive stuff.
Realistically, there will be downtimes.
It's great to think optimistically, but let's plan for whatever the future might bring.
Prudential, bring your challenges.
If you're like us, your pets aren't just animals. They're members of your family. Pet Pain CBD hemp oil drops are great for aging as well as active dogs and cats. Some people are apprehensive about hemp treatments for pets. They ask us, what are you smoking? Absolutely nothing, and neither will your pet. Like other hemp-based products for humans, the allure is all of the benefits of cannabis without any of the high. The CBD oil has shown to rejuvenate the bones, joints, brain, stomach, eyes, and heart. And the drops contain absolutely no corn, wheat, soy, artificial colors and flavors, or preservatives. Pick some up today. Visit petpain.com or ask for Pet Pain at your local pet store. Petpain.com. CBD relief for your pets.
It's the Full Melt Radio Show.
talking about cannabis oil, hash oil, wax. No, told you about, the background and the progression, at least as I experienced it here in Michigan. But, even a couple of years after that point, the point at which we left off before the break, a couple of years after that, you started seeing wax appear in other black markets around the country where there were no medical cannabis laws or retail cannabis available. In fact, retail cannabis didn't even come along until after it was on the black market, this wax. Started seeing, reports around the country, sometimes from police departments, sometimes from, just regular news stories about this new thing called wax or dabs. They call it dabs. And the prohibitionists used it as a scare tactic. And because it was always usually tied to some, they would, the meth lab thing where they talk about meth labs. If there's somebody that's making meth, if you've ever watched Breaking Bad, you know that there are a whole host of scientific implements and chemicals in a recipe that you need to do exactly right, and because it's explosive, it'll blow up on you in a heartbeat if you're not paying attention. The chemicals themselves are extremely volatile, and there's many of them, and they're all poisonous, all of them, and they get made into a gaseous form. So if the gas will escape whatever containment it's in and then get on the walls. And so now this toxic chemical is all over the walls. So when you're talking about something like a meth lab, you're talking about real danger. I mean, you're talking about danger in many forms, and many times any place where a meth lab has existed is usually condemned and destroyed. I mean, it's a hazardous waste area now. There are many reporters and or police that would come out in press conferences talking about how, there's this new rage where people are making this BHO and there's these explosions. And they would equate them to a meth lab. I could see how a layman may do that. But if you don't know anything about the process, you can't make these equations and be serious about it, or at least be taken seriously. Now, don't get me wrong. The process of making BHO can be extremely dangerous, but there's only really one chemical involved as an extractor, and that's the only chemical in the process. And it's butane, which in its gassed form is, at room temperature, butane is gaseous. It's like the air that you breathe. But when it's compressed, it becomes very cold and liquid. The properties change of different things when you heat them or you chill them. Almost everything changes its properties when you change its temperature, especially in severe ranges. It's like glass, when you heat it to an extreme temperature, becomes molten. It's still considered a semi-solid even when it's room temperature. But you can see just how semi-solid it is when it's molten. When it's a very thick liquid. It's like honey. When you make BHO and you use butane, because in liquid form, butane acts as a solvent, just like water does, right? If you take, milk is a solvent when you pour cereal on it. If you pour cereal in a bowl of milk or pour milk on a bowl of cereal, the milk acts as a solvent. It's dissolving the sugar off there if it's a sugar cereal. It's dissolving other crummy, parts of the cereal off. So when you're done eating the cereal, almost always there's something left in the milk that doesn't look like milk anymore. It looks like cereal milk, right? If it's chocolatey, it's got a dark chocolatey color to it. If it's like Fruity Pebbles, it might have like a pink color to it or an orange color to it. Or maybe even a yellowish color. Depends on the cereal you're eating. Almost always the milk will be different in color and flavor because it's acted as a solvent. It's taken some stuff off the cereal and left it behind, and it's mostly sugar, if it's a sugar cereal. Or especially if you put sugar in it, you're going to get a very sweet milk left over with that stuff that's in there. Well, butane acts the same way when it's liquid. The problem is when it gets air temperature, it turns to a gas. When it gets room temperature, it turns to a gas. So if you're running and the reason that people use this as a solvent is because It's very efficient at stripping all of the oil-based product off the cannabis. So people put it in a container, and they run the butane through it in large volumes, say 20 milliliters at a time, say times 5 or 6 of those containers. It comes out the other end, and now there's butane and hash oil. But you can't tell because it's all, I suppose like if you took the milk, the cereal milk, after you were done, instead of drinking it, you boiled off the liquid so that there was no liquid left, there would be some crunchy matter left behind, probably sugar. If you dried up even if you just let the milk evaporate off, like you put it put it outside in the cold where it wasn't going to spoil, and you just let the milk evaporate away, so there's nothing left. You've seen evaporated milk; it's a powder, right? There's something left behind when you take the water out. The water is a solvent. It keeps all that, that powdered milk stuff all floating around in the milk along with the butterfat and stuff. So when you run the butane through this containment of marijuana and out the other end through a filter, usually a piece of T-shirt or muslin cloth or sometimes some screens, whatever's holding the plant material back so that the plant material is not coming out with the butane. The butane's coming out, but it's no longer a clear liquid like normal, pure butane would be. It's got a coloration to it, and it's usually a yellowish color or sometimes a light brownish color. And now you got the problem of getting rid of the butane. Well, how do you do that? It's actually fairly simple. You just let it boil off. If it's summertime out, you could just let it sit there, and by the end of the day, it would evaporate off because it's very cold, and the heat is going to change it into a gas, and the gas is going to evaporate off, as a gas, and then you're going to be left behind whatever the butane was holding in its solution. And so that's how they make BHO. But the problem is butane, as you know, by, Bic lighters and, association with smoking, butane is flammable, obviously. It's highly flammable. I mean, it's combustible. But the funny thing about butane, if you know anything about the properties of butane, it only wants to ignite when it gets to a stage of 9 to 11% oxygen. It's got to have a ratio of 9 to 11% butane to oxygen mixture. And when it reaches that threshold, then it's flammable because the oxygen makes it ignite, right? It's got to have oxygen to burn. If there is no oxygen, it won't burn. But if you're breathing in the area where you're using this chemical, it's going to burn. And it could burn in a gas form. It could burn in a liquid form. It's highly flammable either way. If it burns in a gas form, it's likely to be explosive because there's so much oxygen around and there's so much fuel mixed with it. It's basically like gasoline vapors. If you put a match to gasoline vapors, kaboom, right? It's going to blow up. And that's what happens with butane. So the process of butane extraction should never, ever happen in a building. It just should not, unless and until you put it in a building with a proper laboratory hood and a vent system that's designed to handle petrochemical vapors because they're flammable. So if you just had a regular, let's say you're familiar with the bathroom and the exhaust fan in the bathroom, right? You turn on the poop switch and it sucks out all the nasty air in the bathroom. Well, there's a motor, there's a fan up there that's sucking that out. It's pulling the air out of the room and blowing it usually outside. If you did that with butane, guess what would happen? It wouldn't just go up there and go outside like the stink odor from the bathroom. It would go up there and it would come into contact with that fan and its motor, which is making sparks. And as soon as it sees a percentage of 9 to 11% butane to oxygen, it's going to ignite. And when it does, it's going to be explosive. So you can't use a regular hooding system. You've got to use a hooded system that's designed to handle petrochemical vapors or volatile vapors. Then and only then can you do this safely indoors, and then it's got to be in this hooded containment. It's not someplace you should be breathing in because it's a carcinogen. It will cause cancer. It'll cause lesions in your lungs and in your brain from breathing butane. So people, what I'm saying is when this got popular and the medical market ended up somehow teaching won't go into that process, but somehow the black market teased out of the medical market the method by which they were producing this medicine. And some people, now I know how to do this. So they do it, but they think they know how to do it because they know the recipe. But they don't know the environment that the recipe must be put together in. And so they attempt to do this inside. And almost always to their detriment. Can you do this and get away with it a few times inside? Probably. Are you a fool for doing it? Absolutely, because the moment that you don't get away with it, there is going to be a big explosion. All the windows are likely to blow out, depending on how much your butane you're using and how long in the process you've been going. There will be a residual fire. If it's in your home and you've got any fuel sources in the home, paper, trash, any stuff laying around that's easily ignitable, it's going to likely be on fire when that explosion finishes, and you're probably going to be across the room and on the floor and maybe injured. Now you got a house fire going on. You got an explosion and residual house fire. Nothing compares to this except for a furnace gone bad, right? You've got a leak, a gas leak in the house. The gas leak reaches the ignition source in the furnace or some other ignition source in the house. It ignites all that vapor and oxygen together, and kaboom. I've seen houses flattened this way. I've not seen a house flattened by butane extraction, but I imagine if they got a big process going on in there, it would level a house. Just to give you an idea of the volatility of butane, the amount of butane in a single Bic lighter, is the same as a half stick of dynamite. And I'm not kidding you. There's a half stick of dynamite in your hand in a Bic lighter. If you were to expand it into its gaseous form and ignite it, it would have the explosive force of a half stick of dynamite. These are the properties you're playing with. Wrapping this subject up and continuing with the news if we ever get to it next.
You're getting the full melt.
Promotional consideration provided by NoSmell.com, pioneering the storage market for cannabis users. The NoSmell patented bag technology offers users 100% smell-proof detection from even the most sophisticated of noses. NoSmell.com, so nobody knows. When placing your order for a no-smell bag, make sure to use discount code FULLMELT and take 10% off the entire order. Learn more about no-smell technology at nosmell.com.
Young students are our future. They're eager to learn, eager to succeed, eager to make the world a better place. And they want to make it to school safely. Share the road, take care when passing, and always leave 3 feet between you and people on bikes. Bikes are legal road vehicles. We're all drivers.
When you need legal help, you don't want to guess at who's standing next to you in court. And when it comes to a medical marijuana defense, it's even smarter to partner with a lawyer before you need one. Based in Royal Oak, David Rudoy has a proven history of not being afraid to take your case all the way to the Supreme Court and win. Find the law offices of Rudoy Law
at RudoyLaw.com.
RudoyLaw.com is a quick reference on your rights concerning Michigan medical marijuana
and up-to-date news.
That's RUDOI Law.com. Call 248-935-9074 now and talk about your legal needs, because at RudoyLaw.com, we don't just stand up for you, we stand up with you.
If you're like us, your pets aren't just animals. They're members of your family. Pet Pain CBD hemp oil drops are great for aging as well as active dogs and cats. Some people are apprehensive about hemp treatments for pets. They ask us, what are you smoking? Absolutely nothing, and neither will your pet. Like other hemp-based products for humans, the allure is all of the benefits of cannabis without any of the high. The CBD oil has shown to rejuvenate the bones, joints, brain, stomach, eyes, and heart. And the drops contain absolutely no corn, wheat, soy, artificial colors and flavors, or preservatives. Pick some up today. Visit petpain.com or ask for Pet Pain at your local pet store. PetPain.com. CBD relief for your pet.
Hey, it's Steve Green for the Sweet Leaf in Flint, because now getting safe access to medical cannabis patients in Flint, Michigan is never more welcoming. Presenting the Sweet Leaf, a brand new patient experience bringing 12 carefully selected caregivers housed in 9 separate offices to distinctly assist you with their knowledge and reputation for excellent patient care. Classes and training coming soon in the large community room. Check it out in person, 400 South Door Highway, or call 810-259-2571. The Sweet Leaf Center in Flint, 810-259-2571. It's the Full Melt Radio Show.
You can hear the Full Melt Show Monday through Friday from 7 until 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you get the chance, please go to Spreaker and follow the show. Follow us on Spreaker. Click through our Spreaker site and follow us on Spreaker. We need the follows. Get a lot of people listening to the show. Do get some likes to the show, to different shows, but really want to bump up the followers list. Been talking about butane hash oil, and then I told you about some community calendar events and some other stuff. The end messages here: don't do it. If you're unfamiliar with the dangerous properties of chemicals, don't go screwing with them. At least learn from somebody who knows it before you do it yourself, because otherwise you end up in a situation, like this story today about someplace in Grand Rapids where a house blew up, and they always report it as associated with a marijuana grow. They don't always end up telling you whether it was a legal grow or not, or if it was a medical grow, or if, they talk about it as being, an explosion due to a marijuana grow. And it really bugs me that happens. You cannot blame the news for this. They don't know about the intricacies of this subject. They go out there, somebody tells them there was marijuana there was a grow house there was an explosion there. The fire chief tells you that the explosion was caused by something associated with the grow, and that's how it gets reported. There's nothing fictitious, false, or intended to be nefarious about the reporting of that story. So many people are like, crappy story, crappy reporting. No, it's not the reporter's fault in that instance. You can't blame the reporters. They end up reporting it as this explosion associated with a grow. So people automatically go, when they hear about a grow house or you hear about marijuana in general or legalization or medical marijuana and people growing it, they're always, you can't have that in a residential area. There's going to be an explosion. It's just not true. Grows do not cause explosions. They don't. Could there be a fire? Yes, there is some heat there, and you could, accidentally cause a fire if A, you didn't do the electrical right, or if B, the room overheated for some reason, you weren't paying attention and something flammable got exposed to that heat and caught fire. That sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes will happen. If you're doing the grow right and you know what you're doing, none of that will ever happen. You shouldn't be leaving your garden alone long enough for that to happen anyways. But what happens is people grow the cannabis, and they've got a grow there going on, and then when they harvest the cannabis, they want to turn some of it into wax, and so they go about trying to extract it in the house. And they'll have fans on and blowing it all over. They'll try to do all kinds of stuff to fix the problem, but nothing is going to fix that problem. You're just an idiot. The problem is you're an idiot. The problem is you're messing with things that you don't know the properties of, or you wouldn't be doing it indoors at all. So ultimately, this whole hour-long show that I turned into this story on wax leads back to that. Don't be an idiot. Either let the people that know how to do it and go buy it. Or if you insist on doing it yourself because it's less expensive to produce that way, or you're going to have some byproduct that you want to maximize efficiency out of and turn it into wax, you could do that. But do it outside. I don't want to count you as a statistic. I don't want you doing this in an unsafe way. Technically, there is no real safe way of doing it, because there are other things that you got to consider. Temperature differential. When a lot of people use a glass or a Pyrex dish to collect that concentrate in as it's coming out with the butane. And there's nothing wrong with that. It'll work fine. But the thing is that Liquid butane is minus 40 degrees Celsius. It's very cold. It's minus 40 Celsius. Not minus 40 Fahrenheit. It's minus 40 Celsius. It will cause an instant chemical burn. It's like liquid nitrogen. It's going to freeze you very quickly. If you stuck your finger in liquid nicotine, listen to me. You stuck your finger in, you'd die if you stuck it in liquid nicotine because it would absorb through your skin and you'd OD on nicotine. A drop of liquid nicotine will kill an elephant. If you stuck your finger in liquid butane and held it there for a couple seconds, you would pull it out and you couldn't do it because, number one, your finger would be frozen. It would be extremely painful. But it would completely frostbite your entire finger and likely freeze it to the bone very quickly. So understand the properties, because that cold liquid going into glass, I can guarantee you the glass, and including the Pyrex, where the Pyrex was never designed to handle a material that's minus 40 degrees Celsius. And then what people do, because if you just left it in that state and just left it sit there, it would take a considerable time, depending on the temperature, for it to boil off. It'll slowly evaporate. It's really boiling. It'll boil at room temperature. But if it's cooler out, it'll just kind of sit there. It'll still be evaporating, but just out at a rate which you can see very easily. You come back out and measure it, and it's gone down by half. You come back out, but it'd take hours that way. The way that people handle this time issue is they put that dish in warm water. They expose it to a heat source that's also not connected to flame or spark. So usually they do like you do with chocolate. You put it in a double boiler. So you've got the butane in a dish evaporating off, and you've added this catalyst of heat to make the boiling rapid. And so you know what happens when you put a pot of boiling water on the stove and you let it sit and boil off. It's going to eventually turn into a dry pot, and there'll be some calcium and some stuff left behind, but the water will all disappear. And it won't take that long. You can walk away from it for 10, 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, I forgot that water was boiling, and it's a dry pot on the stove. When you're using this hash oil extraction method that I'm describing here now, they'll float that container in some hot water, and usually a lot of it, because the difference between the hot and the cold makes the hot water the hot water will get cool very quickly in that process, because in that heat exchange. So this evaporates off the oil very quickly. So, and here's the thing: is as the butane evaporates off, the oil gets thicker, and as it gets thicker, less of the butane wants to escape because it's trapped inside the oil. So there's a purging process that has to happen, and we'll talk about that another day. This really went down to the volatility here, because what I started to tell you about that Pyrex dish. Even Pyrex, because Pyrex will handle a much larger temperature differential than regular glass. It's not glass; it's a different substance that's man-made. It's actually patented, I believe, by the Corning Corporation, Dow Corning. Dow Chemical invented Pyrex, and that's why it's expensive. It's got completely different properties. I won't go into all that. But what it means is the Pyrex will withstand a lot more temperature differential. It will not necessarily withstand a high temperature differential. So you got that 40 below liquid in the glass on one side of the glass, and on the other side, sometimes people might put it on a little griddle where there's no ignition or spark, but there's a heat source. If they turn that griddle up too hot, it'll cause the glass to experience an expansion on the outside of the glass and a contraction on the inside of the glass, and that will force the glass to shatter with explosive force. It's not glass, it's Pyrex. It'll do it even quicker with glass. It'll just break. And then you got another problem on your hand. You don't have a chemical explosion, you have a temperature explosion. They're both explosions, and they're both going to end up with oil and fuel all over the place if you don't do this right. So I'm just saying there's a danger associated with this, and you got to be careful. Man, I missed the opportunity. If I see another story about somebody doing this, and I see it all the time, don't be an idiot. Don't give the prohibitionist something to work with. Leave the wax making to the professionals, and if you got to do it to yourself, get a professional to teach you. and follow the instructions precisely. Until next time, I'm Steve Green on The Full Melt Show.
The Full Melt Show is a production of TFM Media.